fine. How are you?
Good. You have a beautiful vintage store here.
Thank you so much.
Oh my gosh. Masha, I'm going to ask you a couple questions.
Yes, please.
Okay, Masha, how long have you owned this vintage store?
We are here now for 2 years.
And Masha, what is your favorite fashion era or decade?
As you can see, it would be 50s.
Oh, nice.
Yes, very feminine cuts and all that I love.
Tell us about the skirt you're wearing.
It's like original 50s skirt made of cotton and linen.
What is a classic wardrobe item that everyone should own?
I believe that's a dress that fits you perfectly.
Masha, how would you describe Croatian style?
Generally speaking, lots of trendy branded clothes.
And what is a trend that you are loving right now?
I love large, oversized blazers, vintage clips that are popular right now from 80s. So.
What is a trend that you think should go away?
Maybe neon colors.
I like that one. What is one piece of vintage shopping advice you think everyone should know?
When you see something you love, you buy it. Because if you want, somebody else will.
No second chances.
Yes.
And last question, what is the best piece of fashion advice you've ever been given?
Maybe some that my mom gave me a long time ago, like whatever you are wearing, you can wear your pearls with it.
Ooh.
So.
I love that. I totally agree. Masha, thank you so much for answering.
Thank you, guys. It was a pleasure.
So fun. I'm going to try on some of your beautiful pieces now.
Okay.
Okay.
Feel free.
Masha is an awesome curator of vintage clothes, but no matter how well a store is merchandised or curated, I think it's still important to know a couple of tips before you go vintage shopping. So here are some of my favorites. My first tip, like with all secondhand shopping, is to go in with a mindset that you have to be patient, comb through racks, and search through the whole store. I also think it's important to have a mindset that you might not come out with anything, and that's totally okay. Sometimes leaving a store without anything in hand is actually a really good feeling. Shop with a list so you don't overconsume, but also give yourself some wiggle room. I always do like a vintage override, especially when I'm shopping in another country. Vintage shopping is really where you can find some beautiful souvenirs and unexpected gems that can push your style a little bit. So I have a little vintage override button in my head. My second tip is to know your budget and how much you are willing to spend for something special. I hear a lot about how vintage and secondhand is becoming more overpriced, but here's what you're paying for, especially with vintage. The time it took for someone to scour and attend auctions, thrift stores, estate sales, and maintain contacts with really good sellers. Vintage store owners also spend a lot of time repairing, cleaning, and restoring garments and accessories. So this requires more time than the average clothing reseller. And finally, you're paying for the curation of an aesthetic that you really like and relate to. And that is a little bit more intangible and harder to put a price on. So that's why you really have to come up with what you value most in clothing. In my opinion, there's nothing more valuable than finding a resource or a curator that has the same taste and preferences as you. So while there is certainly a minimum price that will cover the fixed and variable costs of a vintage garment and store, I would recommend coming up with a number or budget that also includes that goodwill or intangible value that you are willing to pay for a garment that is just right for you. Another tip is to simply understand what vintage means and to get a feel for the merch in the store. True vintage clothing is defined as anything that is 30 years or older. Oh my god, I am vintage. Some identifiers as to the age of a garment are the obvious things like style and silhouette, but you can tell a lot by looking at the tags and the hardware too. For example, prior to the 1960s, most zippers were made of metal and not plastic. Side seam zippers were most commonly used between the 30s and the 60s versus center back zippers became more popular in the 70s, and that continues today. Clothes made in the US prior to 1960 didn't need to include the fiber content percentage, so if you don't don't see that, you're likely looking at a garment that predates the 60s. Garment care labels are also pretty recent, so if you see a label that looks like what we see today, it's most likely post-1970s. And finally, wonky stitching on a vintage garment is not necessarily a sign of poor quality. It could likely mean that the garment was handmade. So look for other clues as to its construction, like the type of fabric, lining, whether seams and buttons are reinforced, things like that. Finally, always try things on. Sizing has changed so much over the years. I mean, it even changes season to season with more modern clothing. So don't judge a garment by the size on the tag. If you're going to a flea market, wear either fitted or tight clothes that can be easily layered over for trying on, or if you know what specific garments you're looking for, like for example, trousers or shorts, then wear a voluminous skirt or a dress so that you can easily try them on underneath without needing a change room. This is especially important when you're going to flea markets or stores that are more like charity shops and things like that. They're less likely to have changing rooms, so it's best to be prepared. Oh, and bring a measuring tape, just for safe measure. Ha ha ha. And that is what I have for you today. I hope you enjoyed today's video and these tips. Let me know if you have some vintage shopping tips in the comments below. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you have a wonderful week, a wonderful day ahead, and I will be back with another slow fashion video. Ciao!